Awesome. Hey, what's up, Scott? Yeah, we are now live. Moto Monday number 31. Guy Tao, Devin, what's up, guys? So, as you can see, we do not have Reese today. Instead, I got a very special guest.
Very special.
Giles. Okay, Giles, I hate to ask. How do you properly pronounce your last name?
Rebholz.
Okay, I had it right. Rebholz. Okay. Just didn't want to butcher it. And yeah, Giles' guest today for Moto Monday number 31. I'll see it. People commenting already and messing with it. Hey, Reese. The prodigal son. Reese is watching. Good to see you. My parents are watching. Everyone's jumping on. So, where do we start with Giles?
Oh, good Lord.
So you've been around racing for a while around here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes. I never raced as a kid. My dad hated motorcycles, but got into it. Actually started on four-wheelers. Yes,
you raced
I know.
them?
Yes, I raced them majorly. We rode in the dunes, then decided to race one day at Albany. Just out of nowhere. Dune bike, 250R, take it to Albany, start racing. Raced Salem Arenacross Series, won a 250 Intermediate Championship on quads there. I know, in 96. No autographs, please. And then mainly I'd rode quads because I had knee issues. Got that fixed, switched to bikes. Stayed, because I lived down McMinnville, so rode Salem.
Yep.
Albany, kind of the home tracks.
Yep.
All the Bob Leach stuff. And then switched to bikes in late 90s. Never looked back, sold all the quad stuff. Kind of forget about that phase in life.
I've seen you bring it up here and there.
Well, it helps to relate because you get a lot of quad people that piss and moan about not being allowed at local tracks. And so, it kind of gives me a little bit of insight because I raced up at Washougal when, Carolyn would have rather shot us than let us on the track, but you have to because it's like a Golden State Series or whatever. And I get why now, but at the time we, felt like redheaded stepchilds of the world. But you try racing Washougal as it's toned down now on a quad, toned down for the quad series up there on a bike day in the dark. So yeah, and then eventually moved up here and then had kids, and now they run it. I mean, that's all they really like to do. So yeah, been in it, been Northwest, racing series since early 90s probably.
Early 90s.
Seen it kind of come and go, but never really traveled around too much on, in the first part of it.
I know I met you back at my dad's old shop,
Yep.
Moto Outfitters. That was when I really kind of got to know you. I think I even saw your old track.
My old track still exists.
Still?
Out in view.
My old track is still there.
Is it?
I went by there last year. I'm like, I don't know, 10 years, and it looks identical.
Really?
They ride quads on them.
Well, they haven't recovered yet. Yeah, mine's still there. I think it was Steve that went out and redid it. I don't know for sure, but I sold that house because it had a track on it. It was not for sale. It had been for sale.
Okay.
But it ended up being a friend of a friend thing and was sold on a handshake. And then I had to, a month to go find another place to build a track on with a little more room. Not a lot of time to find it, but we lucked out with where we were at. But there's nothing like having your real estate agent thinking she's showing you the perfect house, and you're like, you can't build a track there. There's a bad property or a neighbor or all that stuff. So I mean, we kind of lucked out where we're at. It works good. We have horses on one side because half the family's horses and the other half's moto, and so I'd love to have more property, but you're not doing it around here. So
yeah, I've noticed a lot of moto families are like that. They're split down the middle. You got the horse ones, the horse riders, and then the moto people. And almost every private track I've been to is split like that. It's you got a section over here, or like a track I rode at recently. Horses just wander around the moto track, and they're not scared at all. They just watch.
Nope. No, it's actually good for me. My daughter's a very serious eventer. Goal to go to the Olympics, go to Rolex. So she rides at a pretty high level and, trains her own horses and stuff. And she rides them around the track. She rides them while we're riding near them because it does help them not be spooked by sudden movements when you're going cross country, which is basically akin to outdoor motocross on a horse. And when you're at a lot of these events, there's scores and stuff zipping around on pit bikes. So having them be able to not be spooked by something when she's flying through the woods and another rider comes through, the bikes definitely help. So that's kind of part of what she does. Plus she rides around on the track with jumping and stuff. And, you know, she's a huge fan of the sport, but has her own path going on. But I think a lot of places are like that. You know, a lot of people have.
Around here, at least.
Yeah.
A lot of families are in both.
Yeah. This is huge horse country for the Northwest. And it's good moto country, too. So, yeah, you probably get a lot that do both.
So, I want to go back to the quads for a minute.
Oh, God.
Let's go.
No, actually, I'm cool with it. Do it.
Do we call them ATVs or do we call them quads? Sometimes I don't know the correct terminology
the
here.
Vernacular.
Yeah.
Well, at the time when I rode them, there was three-wheelers and quads. There wasn't UTVs and all the other stuff that comes with it now. So, I mean, we just called them quads. I mean,
quads.
It didn't quite have the reputation that they do now. I mean, we're still, like I say, the bastards of the sport. But, I mean, it was a good, close-knit community back then. It wasn't, I kind of look at some of the guys now and just roll my eyes. But there's, a lot of good guys still in it that were in it back then. But, I mean, you knew everybody you were riding against. It was, you hung out because that was all it was. But Bob Leach was probably the biggest supporter at the time of that type of racing. All his events, he included them, and he had decent turnouts. And we were all pretty hardcore racers. But it was really the death of the sport. I mean, it to be honest, what killed and continues to kill quad motocross is way harder than riding a bike. It is gnarly to jump stuff when one wheel's in one rut and the other one's not, and it's an uneven track, and you're muscling this big-ass piece of machine around. They're a hell of a lot more fun in the dunes or on the trails because there's more work. I mean, that's just the facts. That
was exactly what I was going to go into, because I want to segue into something deeper in a moment.
Uh-oh.
But, so, quad racing, would you say its heyday would be what era? Like late 90s to early mid-2000s? Because I'd say 05, there's a lot of stuff still happened. I mean, I saw a lot of events.
And there could have been. I am completely detached with it after I got out of it. I had no interest in following it.
What would you say, at least in the Northwest, was the heyday for quad racing?
Well, again, since I've been out of it, I haven't followed it. And I think it had been rekindled a little bit when the new quad... Because when we were riding it, we weren't... I mean, the only thing stock Honda on my bike was probably the brake pedal and the engine cases. I mean, rode for LRD. Arlen helped me out a lot, even though I wasn't the greatest rider in the world. He did a lot for me. I was okay, but I wasn't, I was never going to turn pro. But it was really dying then because nothing was manufactured. So in 92, we were riding, the newest machine you could have was an 89. Well, Banshees, but we're not going to talk about them. Everybody basically rode 250Rs. Or a few people still rode the Suzuki Quad Racers. But they were done manufacturing them until it came back with the 4-stroke. So I think there was a resurgence then, but I didn't follow it in any way, shape, or form at that point. But there was, it was pretty big back 86, 87. I mean, 3-wheelers were people racing.
Oh, yeah, I remember 3-wheelers.
So, you got Gary Denton and, locally you had Keith Marks, Corey Ellis, all those guys.
Ellis, yeah.
Yeah, those guys were, really running it up here, and it kind of died off. I think Corey moved south to California. Keith's farming now. Those guys kind of moved off, and, there was a Marks. I don't know if I mentioned Keith Marks. The local guys were the fastest. Scooter Wingert, he still races up here. He's out of Vancouver now. He was kind of one of that crew that we were in, and he's still doing it. He's kind of family-wise like I am now, but it was really big up until I think the early 90s when they stopped making them. Mm-hmm. We just didn't have the machines, and the industry pulled out of it, and there was no bikes to buy. You couldn't go down the showroom and buy a race bike. So,
well, I like to point at, because I think I'm qualified to say I'm fairly in the motocross industry.
Yeah, that's probably a generally true statement.
Sometimes I get a little deep in my conversations because it's just something that's always in my mind. I probably overly analyze a lot of the stuff in the industry, but I think it's fairly safe to say the moto industry is not at its peak right now. We're not at a peak, especially locally, we're not, maybe for technology, but as far as people riding, racing, how many vehicles are being sold, we're not at a peak. I often bring up parallels to quad racing because I think it's fairly safe to say it's about dead, at least in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I think that's a very safe statement. I think there may be pockets of it across the U.S.
You can count the tracks in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho that'll even allow quads to go out for a practice day on one hand.
Well, because a track is a business. And if you don't, and two, a quad track, from a builder's point of view, if I'm going to build for a quad, I'm not going to build the obstacle the same as I am for a bike. Yeah. They're two completely separate things. And the biggest thing you always hear is, everybody has to ride the track. That's great. But the track has to make money. And if 20 bikes don't show up because one quad does, I think everybody can do basic math.
Yeah.
That's bad. But yeah, it is definitely, from what I've seen, and I only kind of get involved when people do this stuff online and, bagging on tracks because they don't allow them, because it's a business decision. If allowing, quads was making track millions, then freaking awesome. I think everybody would support that because it would mean more tracks for everybody. It doesn't, guys. Face it, facts, done. It's a money loser. And again, the reasons I have from riding them is because, frankly, they're harder than hell to ride out there.
So what do you think was, I'm sure there's dozens of different things you could point at, but what do you think was one of the things that really killed the quad racing? And do you think there's anything the moto community could maybe take some tips from watching another very sister community die, basically,
Ooh. Hey, I bet when everybody tuned in, you didn't think we were going to talk about quads tonight. I sure as hell didn't.
I'm sorry.
Well, it is an interesting thing because it does have some parallels.
Very similar sister sports. In the big scheme of outdoor activities, they're very close.
Kind of. I don't think quad racing ever had a real heyday like motocross did. I think it's a microcosm. I think you could make that comparison there as far as a microcosm of what it did. Because motocross was, huge.
Yeah.
Huge 70s, 80s, and I have a theory on that, why it's dying. Quad racing, and it might be similar between the two, but...
Well, let's start with if you could draw any parallels or maybe things we could learn from watching one sport die out that much. And then I want to hear your input on why you think motocross is not at its peak.
I'm not trying to... Expense and injuries. Really, it's tough. It's not an easy thing to do to muscle one of those machines around a motocross track, especially because the tracks are built for bikes. So you're not riding. It'd be like trying to take, let's say, your car, taking a huge extreme example, your car around Washougal. You have a pretty tough time doing it. Not going to be good on the car. Chances are you're not going to do well doing it. Same thing with, on a much less scale, you try and take a quad around a bike track, it's not tuned, it's not matched up. You got to have fun, you got to feel like you're accomplishing something and you're doing well in, any hobby that you do, and motocross is a hobby from my point of view. And so you've basically set it up for failure at that point because the track wasn't built because it's an offshoot. You don't have enough to run your own events. I think when the quad cross guys do it, they mellow things out, change the angles, because the physics are different. Different suspension, different layouts. And so you've got guys that just aren't going to have as much success doing it, especially kids. You're not going to be able to bring kids in because there isn't one kids race quad made. You got to put them together.
Yeah.
You got to build them. So, that's another daunting thing, is it's very inaccessible to new riders. The only way you're going to grow a sport is new riders. And the best way to get new riders is when they first come in to it and they start from the ground up on 50s or whatever quads do now. There's nobody sells one. Okay, maybe somebody's going to point out that Ushikami whatever sells some quad whatever, I don't know. Honda, Cowie, KTM, all that. Nobody sells one. Hell, they barely even sell race quads in general anymore. So that's probably the biggest death there, is accessibility, both track wise and machine wise.
Okay. So then, in your opinion, I know this is something we could go into for a half hour, but
oh yeah,
Yeah.
We have.
I think we've done that before.
Yep.
In your opinion, then, why do you think the sport of motocross isn't thriving as much? I don't even know if I worded that properly, because it's not dead. It's actually, I've seen some really good turnouts at some recent events. I mean, it's in a weird state. In a nutshell, what's your opinion on it?
It's trying to find itself. I mean, really, motocross is trying to find its path going forward. You have a different generation of people. And, you know, if you kind of follow the pro level of it, they're trying to model our pro level off of NASCAR. Well, motocross